All right, let's dive into one of biology's most incredible, creative, and, let's be honest, demanding strategies for keeping life going. It's this high risk, high reward game that pretty much defines every complex living thing on our planet.
When it comes to making the next generation, life on Earth really had a fundamental choice to make: go it alone or team up. It's the difference between making a perfect, identical copy or, rolling the genetic dice and seeing what you get.
So, what's the actual big idea behind teaming up? Well, we're going to break down that universal blueprint that connects almost all complex life, everything from the tiniest insect all the way up to the tallest tree. At its heart, it's basically a mashup. It's a process where two parents each throw their genetic blueprints into the pot to create something completely new. The result isn't a clone of mom or dad, but a totally unique individual. And that uniqueness, well, that's the key to this whole story. Okay, first up, let's take a look at how the animal kingdom pulls this whole thing off. For animals, this is a very active process. I mean, it's a whole production, often involving these really complex behaviors, from fancy courtship dances to some pretty fierce competition. It really just boils down to three key steps. First, you've got gamete production. The body creates these special cells, sperm and eggs, through a process called meiosis, which is just a fancy way of saying it makes sure these cells only have half the normal genetic stuff. Next up is fertilization. That's the magic moment the sperm and egg unite and become a single cell, called a zygote. And from there, it's all about development, as that one cell divides and grows and eventually becomes an embryo. And boom, what do you get? A brand new life form, carrying a completely shuffled deck of genes, half from one parent, half from the other. No two are ever the same, unless you're talking about identical twins, but that's a whole other story. Okay, so that's animals. Now let's totally switch gears and look at the plant kingdom. See, they're playing the exact same game, mixing up genetics, but they are using a completely different playbook to get it done. For most plants, it also happens in about three main stages. It all kicks off with pollination. That's just the job of getting the pollen, which holds the male genes, over to the female part of a flower. Once it's there, fertilization happens, and the pollen's genes fuse with the egg. And finally, that fertilized egg develops into a seed, which is basically a tiny little life support package with an embryo and a packed lunch. Now, here's where things get really different. Unlike animals, who can, get up and find each other, most plants are stuck in one place, so they need help. They basically need a delivery service for their pollen. And that could be anything: bees, the wind, a splash of water, whatever gets the job done.
So we've got two very different methods going after the exact same goal, which of course leads to a pretty interesting question about the trade-offs, right? The pros and cons for each kingdom. So let's put them head to head and see what's what.
This table lays it all out pretty clearly. First thing you'll notice, the huge advantage for both is that genetic variation. That gives them a major survival edge. But after that, things start to look different. Plants, for instance, get that cool bonus of seed dispersal. They can send their kids off to new places. But then look at the disadvantages. It really shows the trade-offs. Animals burn a ton of energy actually finding a mate, while plants burn their energy attracting pollinators. Both are super costly, just in totally different ways. And really, that's the bottom line here. No matter which way you slice it, making brand new genetic combinations is not cheap and it is not fast. I mean, compared to just making a copy of yourself, sexual reproduction is a huge investment of time and energy for both animals and plants. Which brings us to the big billion-dollar evolutionary question. If this whole process is so slow, so difficult, and so energy-intensive, why on earth did it become the #1 strategy for all complex life? Was the payoff really worth the price of admission? The answer to that question is a massive, resounding yes. Absolutely. All that time, all that energy, it's all worth it for one single reason: the grand prize. And that prize is genetic variation. It is the ultimate evolutionary win. So here's why it's such a big deal. This variation gives species a huge advantage in the long run. A diverse population is way more adaptable. If the climate suddenly gets hotter, chances are someone in the group has the right genes to handle it. It also builds resistance, so a single disease can't just sweep through and wipe everyone out. It helps filter out bad mutations, and maybe most important of all, this constant genetic shuffling is the actual fuel for evolution itself. It's what makes change possible. So, to wrap it all up, we're left with this one powerful idea. In the high-stakes game of life, it turns out that nature's most successful players didn't bet on making copies. They bet on making combinations. Sure, it's the slower and harder path, but it's the strategy that gave us the beautiful, resilient, and unbelievably diverse world we see all around us today.